Querida audiencia de este programa de TV Azteca, Era de las Definiciones. Nuevamente estamos con ustedes entrevistando y platicando con una gran personalidad que fue en su tiempo y es todavía Premio Nobel de la Paz. Ella está en África, en Libia, en la capital Mandovia, y es una gran mujer, precisamente en estos tiempos donde en México y en el mundo se están haciendo tantas positivas consideraciones para la mujer. So, thank you very much, Ellen, for being here with us. I'm telling the audience that you had a great story to tell on a pretty special place in the world, and that you did receive, were awarded with the Nobel Prize because of the striving and the struggles that you held in your country to move the country into democracy and to move the country into development. So, Ellen, if you don't mind, I'd like to start for you telling us a little bit about Mandavia and Libya, where you were born and raised. What kind of a country? I understand it's about 5-6 million, just about what we have in the state of Guanajuato in Mexico. But what kind of life was there at that time, back in between First World War and Second World War in Africa? What was it like? Where did you go to school? And how did you started your first step in your challenging life?
My country, Liberia, on the west coast of Africa, was founded by emancipated slaves from the United States. And they came, of course, they had an indigenous population that were in country. The integration of the two did not work very well. And that created over time some tensions in the society that has pertained even until today. My own person, I was born in the capital city, Monrovia, but I had parents that were mixed. My mother was part indigenous and part expatriate. My father was fully indigenous. He was the first indigenous member of the Liberian legislature, which is the parliament. So I grew up in a country that had feet in both worlds. And so at some point, because he was in high position, we had a life of fair prosperity, but he got sick while we were very young. And we did not have good medical attention. And so he died early. And the life we knew was cut off. So we then descended into some of a life of poverty too, where my mother, who was a teacher and a preacher, had to do everything to support us in school. But the one thing that we were left with was one, education is what will get you what you want in life. That came from my mother. From my father, never forget your roots. And so I became, in a way, a progressive very early in my public service. And I traveled a long leadership role. That role led me at some point with period off, for school, with marriage. I was married. I have 4 sons, and I had them very early, but went back to school after I had my children. But I progressed in my profession. I studied accountancy in my undergraduate work, and I started public service and started a climb of doing things and moving up the ladder. I had an opportunity to go back to school. This time I did some work at the University of Colorado in economics, and then I went to the John F. Kennedy School of Public Administration and graduated from there, and came back and went back into public service. I challenged our government on some of their policies from time to time. I was criticized. I was, abandoned. Went into exile. Finally, of course, after I went out, I worked at the World Bank for some time, and then came back to the country, and I challenged again. And then I went back out because I was forced out. I went to jail when there was a coup d'etat in our country in 1980. Everything fell apart. And that ended me in jail. This was 1980. After 1980, it was when I went back to Harvard and then came back. I came back and I challenged the Doe government. That ended me in prison. And I went into prison a couple of times. And then I had to go back into international public service again. I went to UNDP. I then became head of the Africa Bureau. And I stayed there and completed 5 years of service. In 1997, we were then faced with Charles Taylor. Charles Taylor was, in a period of destruction of our country. I came back and challenged him in 1997. I did not win. He had full control of everything. And I tried to stay in the country. I was forced into exile again.
Okay.
And I went into exile. And then I did a lot of activism on the outside, working with other African leaders, pointing out the destructive acts of Taylor. And finally, we were able to get the countries of Africa, the West African countries, to send in troops. And in 2003, after President Bush made a strong stand for us, when he openly said Charles Taylor must go. And when that happened, our West African leaders formed a meeting in Ghana. We had the Africa peace talks. I then, 2003, when the peace accord was signed, I came back into the country then and started my work again. I went into the interim government with position for just 1 year. Then I went into my party work.
Okay, what a life, Ellen, what a life of challenges. But let me go back to the country and country's economy. What was the economy then? What kind of economy existed when you were young? And what kind of economy or economic sectors is prevalent today in Liberia?
When I was young, Liberia is a mining company. So we had large mining operations, mainly owned by United States corporations. In another case, in a collaboration with Germans. So we had about 2 or 3 large mining operations. We also have what became the world's largest rubber plantations. Because Liberia being, if you may, a protege of the United States, and at that time, Firestone had major rubber operations in Asia, and they were looking for an alternative. So they established a plantation in Liberia, a rubber plantation, that is still in operation today. But those 2 activities being in certain way extractive, although plantations are not extractive, they're regenerative. But we did not have the capacity of governance to be able to manage those endowments well. And so there was large exploitation. Most of the resources went out of the country, leaving us growth. There were times when our growth reached as high levels as double digits during those periods, but it was clear it was growth without development. A story that had been told. We then traveled along, and frankly, we've never yet done the kind of structural adjustments to be able to get rid of large corporate entities exploiting countries in the country, because we've always been fragile. You know, we had war in 1980. That war led to destruction of the small bit of development that had been done. The president who was there was a benevolent dictator. His name was Tubman. He ruled for 27 years. Wow. But 27 years was based upon patronage. The patronage of just giving everybody what they needed, but never concentrating on developing the country or attacking the structural problems that existed. So, but the country moved on. The coup of 1980 led to massive destruction and massive displacement of people, many of whom the intelligentsia of the country all ran away during the coup d'etat. Today, most of them are still living in the United States. There are professionals there, there are workers there, they are there. And because after the coup, we went into a period of 2 decades of conflict, more destruction, wow. more dysfunctional institutions, more oppression, more authoritarianism. This country has never had the chance to know itself and to reach its potential. When I took over, January 2006, we had a budget of 80 million United States dollars. We had no reserves. We had an external debt that had not been serviced for 2 decades. That was 4.7 billion owed to multilateral, bilateral institutions, even owed to commercial creditors. We were able to do debt relief. We were able to start the process of recovery. And in my 2 terms, we tried to lay all the foundation. We met a collapsed economy, non-functioning institutions, no laws, no discipline. The moral fabric of the country had been destroyed.
Ellen, this is a story that has been a story shared by many underdeveloped countries throughout the world, but you made the change and leadership made it. And I am sure education has been an intense factor for change. But let us go to a break because we run our first 10 minutes and we will be right back if you don't mind.
Very well.
Okay. Hola, Ellen.
Yes,
Ellen,
welcome
we're back to the program. Are you there? Yes.
Yes, I am.
Ellen, fantastic what you've been telling us. For the audience, it's very important to learn about Liberia and to learn about your life in that continent. In Africa, we're too far away, but we have many similar stories in Latin America about government development, about governance, about democracy, about freedom. And well, today we're 2 regions that are progressing thanks to leaders like you. Now, that leadership, Ellen, came about, I guess, and this is my guess, number one, when you're in jail, maybe gives you a lot of time to think about your purpose in life, a lot of time to think about what you can do, about that, how you can change things, and that will nourish leadership to make it stronger with a purpose that is in a way heroic. Number two is the experience you were gaining throughout your life, moving to different nations, meeting different people, meeting different leaders and institutions, and that gave you the other side of the coin, because you come back to your country and you made a change, a profound change, a great impact on the people. So, but tell me about that specific. When do you felt you had a mission and a purpose to go after, and that you had the capacities, the friends, as you say, to be able to come back to the arena and gain the battle?
Well, I think the first major motivating force came when, in 1959, when I challenged, in a very young age, the policy of a president that had served the country for 27 years. And I was then threatened with my first jailing, but that didn't happen because Harvard University had a team in the country as economic advisor. That's how I got to Harvard. But at Harvard, I was able to reflect and to meet people. And this is when the movement in the United States, was starting against Vietnam or something. And so, let's say I was, in a way, I became more radical, meeting young people who were standing up, asking for the removal of their troops from the country. So that, but subsequently, when I came back, each time I faced problems, that really just reinforced my commitment to say there has to be a change. You're so right. When I went to prison and I saw the conditions of prison, and I said, in my condition, I'm already elevated. I had NGOs appealing to the government to bring me food and to bring me the essentials of life. I said, what would happen to all the poor people who had nobody? They would stay in jail. Sometimes the judicial systems would not even give them the opportunity of a trial. And so that really reinforced. And so, but you're right, part of it too was the broadening of my perspective, because I traveled abroad, I met contacts abroad, I saw other people, other presidents, or other activist leaders, emerging leaders who themselves were taking on challenges as I was, and so I could also not only share in the difficulty they face, but also be a part of their movement of persistence and commitment to be able to be a part of the change. And so, yes, and when I had the opportunity of leadership in the United Nations system, I also used that, not only to broaden my own knowledge, but also I had the opportunity to interact with different other types of politicians who face different types of challenges. And I was able to also broaden my own experience because of them, to learn from them, to enable me to strengthen my own resolve to prepare for it. But on a personal experience, I can tell you, you are never prepared for externalities. As successful I was as a president, in my first term, everything worked. Our growth rate was going up. I had a second term of success. I won the second term. I battled a very international football icon. I battled him twice. I won the first one conclusively. We had a runoff, but I used that opportunity to not only to learn my own country, but to go to every place in my country, visit as many villages as I could, and to be a part of the people. I ate with them. I sat on the ground with them. I drank with them, you know. So I built that support. So when the time came for election, as popular as he was, but also education was a key. Because also when I spoke with knowledge and information and experience that was not lost to a younger generation who themselves desired an education and a professional life. So they became part of my core group that brought me to a a second term success. Coming back to externalities, in my second term, we had reached the highest growth rate we had. We had reached 9%. Our average over the period was 8.7%. We faced Ebola, something we had no knowledge of, no anticipation of. Ebola hit us and everything changed again. All the growth we had put in, all the development we had done was now threatened by an unknown enemy. And we had to go to another war, the war of being able to overcome, a pandemic for which we were not prepared, not equipped, not in terms of capacity, knowledge, systems, etc. But we overcame that too, with persistence. So, the leadership journey is so long. And it takes people who are just willing to stay with it and to be able to overcome, obstacles that you will face, to overcome sometimes failure. I lost 2 elections before I won. So that was all part of the grooming, part of preparing me for proper public service.
Yes, Ellen, no doubt that you've given us a lesson on elements of leadership. Every one single of your words on this last intervention has to do with leadership, which is what we try to show to kids, to young people in our program. How a leader gets strong, how a leader commits with the cause, how a leader has a vision and a purpose, how a leader forms a team and works with others, how a leader gets information and information that uses for success. But again, 10 minutes went by. So we're going to go to a
10 minutes gone again. Okay.
short break and we'll be right back. Thank you. Ellen, thanks again for being with us. Ellen, you mentioned Ebola as one additional obstacle in the race to development, to sustainability. Now we have this terrific pandemia worldwide. What are your comments in relation to that? What is happening in Liberia with this new menace to development that has affected all humankind?
Well, I was appointed by the Director General of WHO, a co-chair, along with the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, to be able to form a panel. We have a panel of expertise in every discipline you can think of to determine what happened. Why was the world unprepared for this pandemic? What role did WHO play? What role did the international system play? How can we ensure that the world would be better prepared for another pandemic? That has taken a lot of my time. We've been working on this since we were appointed in July of last year. Our report to the World Health Assembly is scheduled to be made in May of this year. That report will tell it all, based upon all the studies, the contributions, the investigations, the research, everything. It will tell. Fortunately, Africa has not been so hard hit with COVID-19. Maybe because of our experience with Ebola, where we were better prepared in being timely to effect the protocols that are necessary, like social distancing, masks, Africa hasn't been. But the COVID-19 has been disastrous for the world. Who would have guessed that would have penetrated every country? We said during Ebola, please do not see this as a West African predicament, because the world today is too interconnected, too intertwined. And we've been proven correct by COVID-19. And so there was no vaccine for Ebola, because we were 3 poor African countries that were affected. But the penetration of COVID-19 and the exposed inequities and injustices in the world, George Floyd and what has happened, what started the whole rethinking of why the world has to refix. The world has to set new agendas. And without cooperation and collaboration, I'm afraid we'll not be prepared again for the next possible pandemic. So we hope that this experience of COVID-19 will lead to changes in attitudes, changes in policies, changes in institutions, so that we all can have a better world. And we're looking at the equity when it comes to vaccine. The poorer countries still do not have the resources. And even though we have this internet, this global platform that has been prepared to help the poorer countries, where at least 20% of the population of poor countries will be provided through COVAX, but that's just 20% of the population. Resourceful countries are going to ensure that 100% of their population will get vaccine. How will we get the resources for the rest? How will the pharmaceutical companies become part of those that are willing? How will they help to get manufacturing in other parts of the world that do not have the resources, so we don't have to be so dependent through trading systems, on getting what we need? How do we see vaccine as a public good? Those are all the issues that COVID-19 have now unearthed, and that we have to find a way to respond to.
This is the fight we are facing all around the world. And again, leadership has to come up with answers, because this divide between those who have access and those who do not is again repeating. And I think we have to break that cannot happen. And I know United Nations, World Bank are fighting to get there. Now, you are a Nobel Prize laureate on peace. Did you expect the Nobel Prize? Number 2, what impact did the Nobel Prize did into you as a person, as a leader? And number 3, how this instrument, this empowerment, gave speed to meeting your challenges?
I did not expect the Nobel Prize. I had not kept the records of my success in governance. But the Mo Abraham Foundation, that has a research on governance, the Mo Ibrahim Index of Governance, have a record that I had made, or my country had made the best progress over the tenure of my presidency. I didn't say we're at the highest level, but we made the most progress in every area of governance. That's how I was invited the Nobel Peace Prize. Well, that gave me two things. One, it gave me the resources I didn't have to be able to continue my work. Secondly, it gave me the motivation that now that I had been successful in country, I also knew that my success was not mine alone. My success was based upon a strong team of people that work for me, and particularly women, Liberian women, African women, world women, who saw my success as their success, who saw me to represent their aspirations in whatever I did. So that was motivation for me to say, I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to go into retirement and enjoy the money that Mo Ibrahim gave. I would take some of that money and I would give back. And my giving back was to establish the Ellen Johnson-Sirleaf Presidential Center for Women in Development. And today I'm building a cadre of women that we want to support them on their leadership journey to take high-level positions. And I'm so pleased that we had a first cohort of 15. They're coming from 7 African countries. Most of them are professionals themselves who are on their journey, but who will never reach the top unless we change attitudes, change the world, and support them. Now we have a second group of 15. So we have 30. We hope we can expand it. We want to fill that gap on the pyramid. You know, where at the top, there's just few. At the bottom, there's all the people, the women who are the nurses and the teachers and the farmers and the marketeers. But get up there to who's the CEO of major corporations, who's the president, who's the prime minister. That gap, we want to fill that gap so we can have a wave of women that are progressing. And I hope that if your station permits, that sometime you invite one of my Amuje leaders. Some of them are so dynamic in their countries. Invite them on your program. You know, that in itself will motivate them some more if they feel they have some international attention. People can see their story. That is motivating.
That's a fantastic suggestion, Ellen. I'll take it. And if you please, when we finish, give me a couple of names so that we can connect with them and invite them to the program. So thank you for that. It's going to be very valuable because that's what we need, voices to be heard. There are so many heroic stories around the world, especially in the small countries, in the small regions of the world, people that is working without expecting recognition, but to make them visible is a fantastic idea, and I will pursue on that. Now, we're running out of time. Ellen, one last question. How is your country connected to the African Union? Because I understand the African Union has made a strong contributions when it's all together fighting for this kind of issues. And always the pyramid, the small guys and the medium size, and then the top guys, we need to connect, and through the world institutions like you've done, the World Bank, the United Nations, but also to regional institutions. What are your thoughts on African Union? Is it still a movement? Is it still working professionally?
Yes, let me start with the Economic Community of West African States because I chaired it for 1 year. And they have been good in solidarity with each other. They have been good in preventing anyone who tries to create disturbances and tries to repress the people and whatnot. So I start with that. And right now they're involved in regional integration and cooperation to be able to address our infrastructure deficiency cross-border that we've had for too long. African Union itself has made a lot of progress. We've come a long way from the time when people just went and made long speeches. Now they define areas, topical areas for which to have proper research papers done. You have countries that are going to present them and be full discussions on them. And I'm glad when it comes to gender parity, the African Union has already made that decision and effective it. There's full parity there. All of the commission positions are 50% men, 50% women. And so countries that nominate know that they have to stick to that rule. I wish we had that kind of rule in every country, when it comes to national politics, but African Union has set the pace. We also have Agenda 2063. This is Africa's long-term vision, of the Africa we want. And it sets all the different things. And one of the ones for Africa is self-dependence, self-reliance. We're tired of being dependent on the handouts, through institutions, through partnerships, through donor arrangements. We have some of the best natural endowment in the world. And today, our population is the youngest in the world. What we lack is the technology. We lack the infrastructure. Today, we now have the political will. And that's the most important thing. With the political will, you can come together and you can solve the other problems. So we're still dependent. We get a lot of support, the African Union, with countries abroad, and we have a lot of relationships, and we should. And many of bilateral relationships remain intact, and they will be. But as an African Union, with an African agenda, the one thing we say is, tomorrow, we want to be the ones that determine our future. We want to be in charge of our own future.
Fantastic, Kelly. Fantastic. You don't know how much I miss this idea to be implemented and working in Latin America, because since Bolivar said that we should unite all Latin Americans, we have never listened to him and we have never done it. We work out individually. We don't have the power that you get when you unite, and we don't have the impact that we could have, because I think in that kind of institutions, regional institutions, you have more moral and ethical values that are trying to implement among the different nations. So, well, we run out of time, and you don't know how much I appreciate all the lessons, ideas, concepts that you have shared with us. And I take your proposal to invite other people from developing countries, stories of success that are not visible enough, because they're contagious. We take it and we want to be like, and that's what I want to promote with this program. Thank you very much. I hope to see you in the near future, and enjoy yourself and have a happy life and great future for yourself.
Thank you, Vicente. We'll send you the names. The first one we want is the Freetown of Sierra Leone. Her name is Yvonne Akisoya. She was on Time Magazine, one of the upcoming leaders of the world. She's one of the first ones we want to commend to you. There will be others, but thank you. It's been a great conversation, and thank you for bringing me onto your platform.
Gracias, my heart to you. Bye-bye.
Bye.